Now we have alternatives. There are alternatives. I'm going to show you some of those. And here's one. This is the Ubuntu Studio. Now with this we have a choice. We have our same user here. We have a choice of an XFCE session or an Ubuntu Studio. Let's just try Ubuntu Studio and see what that looks like. Okay. Now this is looking similar. If you've used Ubuntu Studio before, you will find that this is similar. Now, let's see what our menu looks like. Now, this is looking somewhat similar to the Ubuntu Studio menu, if you're used to that. However, it's not exactly the same as the older Ubuntu Studio previous versions, because it's not using the GNOME desktop. It is using the XFCE desktop, and there are some subtle differences that we're going to be coming to and covering soon. But this is the Ubuntu Studio flavor of the XFCE desktop. Now, again, let's keep our comparisons simple and straightforward here. If you're coming here from the Macintosh world, here's a little something to make you feel at home. As I bring my cursor to the bottom of the screen, you get this little lower menu bar, which is somewhat reminiscent of the Macintosh. Now, since I'm running this in a virtual box, you can see the background of the bar. This machine has a good graphics card. Notice the lower panel is transparent. And here I go, panel preferences, and on the appearance tab, I have an alpha slider that I did not have in the other system, because this has a better graphics card. Back on our lower quality graphics card, if we select the panel preferences and look in the appearance, you see that we have less choices, because this is a less quality, less expensive video display card. Doesn't support all the 3D graphics features. I'm going to log out. If you've used the XFCE desktop previously, you'll probably feel right at home with the Ubuntu Studio or the XFCE desktop in Ubuntu Studio. If you haven't, there's a few things we'll have to explain to you. All in all, it's not a bad desktop. So we have choices. For those that are not exactly thrilled with the Unity desktop, there are choices. So we'd like to show you all those choices now. This is our Ubuntu Studio 12.4, and we're now choosing the XFCE session. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. There's our XFCE desktop, and again we have our little helpful balloons appearing, which we will ignore for now. And there's the XFCE desktop, and here's our menu. And as you can see, the menu is somewhat similar to the Studio desktop in that it is one long menu as opposed to the older GNOME three-tiered menu system. Okay. Now there are some settings we'll have to go through, but let's first, before we go any further, I want to show you what some choices are as far as the desktop with 12.04. Okay, so now we're back to our Studio version. We're going to add the GNOME desktop to this as well. We're going to do a little twist in this. If you noticed, we last on the standard Ubuntu 12.4 desktop, the last example, we showed you how to add the GNOME fallback desktop. We're going to do a slightly different variation this time. We're going to go to the Software Center. and we're going to just enter GNOME for our search criteria. And we're going to add the GNOME desktop components. We're going to pick the full GNOME desktop. We're going to install this and see what happens here. Now this may be more complete or slightly different than the last. I'm not really sure. We're going to find out. Let's see what gives. This is going to take a little while, I'm sure, to download and install. There's quite a bit to it. But we're going to do this and we're going to see what happens. Let's see what we get for choices and see what our desktop looks like when all is said and done. At this point, we have a little interaction required here on this one. Click forward. So let's see if this installs nicely alongside our existing newer desktops. And here we see our GNOME desktop environment is almost finished installing here through the Ubuntu Software Center. It should not be much longer until this completes. And then we will be able to log out and log back in and see what we've got here. It looks like it's completed. So we can, it says session restart required. Okay, so let's do that. Well, you know what, we can do a complete reboot just for giggles. We should just be able to log out and log back in, but we'll do a reboot. Let's see what gives with this. Now, let's see what our other choices here remain to be. We have GNOME Classic, no effects. That's for a cheaper spread of video display, recovery console. That's for when you're really in trouble. We could take a look at that. Let's just see what we got with that. That's probably just going to be a plain old terminal console. Let's see. Yes. Okay. That's a terminal window. So if you're really in trouble, you back to command line, you can use that to get yourself out here. Let's exit that. Now we're back to our Ubuntu Studio. But here we're going to go to the Ubuntu Software Center. We're going to type Ubuntu-desktop. And there's the Ubuntu desktop system, and let's install this and authenticate. The point that we're showing all this here, we're showing you the standard Ubuntu desktop. We're also showing you the Ubuntu Studio and all the options we have for desktops. We're not saying we don't like the Unity desktop, but we're saying in this video presentation that you have choices, and we're showing you what those choices are. As an option, we can also use the command terminal and the apt-get install utility as shown here. Give this a whirligig here. So you can also do this in the Synaptic Package Manager or in the Ubuntu Software Center. I personally like the command line because if something goes wrong, it tells me right away and I can deal with it. At any rate, we're going to see now this VirtualBox rendition of our Ubuntu Studio. We want to see if we can get the regular new Ubuntu desktop to run. All right. Let this finish and see if we get our standard Ubuntu desktop. The point we're trying to show you here is that on this system we can have the Studio desktop, the new Studio desktop, which is based at XFCE, You can have the Ubuntu Classic Desktop, which is the GNOME Classic Desktop. By any other name, it's a GNOME Desktop. It's the newer version with the system moved over to the right, as you saw earlier, or the new Ubuntu Desktop, which is also formerly known as the Unity Desktop. So, sometimes having a lot of choices is good. Sometimes having a lot of choices can be confusing. That's the purpose of this little video clip, to let you see what your choices are if you're moving into Ubuntu 12.04. As you can see, there's quite a bit to this. It's taken a while to grab all this stuff and set it all up. A lot of code that the community spent a lot of time working, so, you know. I never like to knock another man's work, especially with all the effort put in. Or woman's work, for that matter. As you can see, this new Ubuntu desktop is coming with quite a bit of additional applications as well, if you're watching this as it goes by. This is quite a bit of stuff in this. There we see a lot of Unity stuff going through here. Okay, we got this done here. We have a system restart required. Let's give it what it wants. Restart now. And let's see if adding this choice in, we now have all these desktop choices with this Ubuntu Studio version. Again, we're showing you this on the Studio because the Studio has another version of desktop. You can also do similar things on a standard desktop where you'd have the GNOME or the new Ubuntu Unity desktop. The choices. It's nice to have choices. There we go. Okay, now let's see what our choices are here. Okay, now we have Ubuntu and Ubuntu 2D. Let's try Ubuntu and put our password in. You feel lucky, punk? This is looking somewhat promising. And here we go. So, like we said, it's nice to have choices. So now on this system, we have an Ubuntu Studio, a fresh 12.04 Ubuntu Studio install we did. And we have choices now since we added our other desktops to this system. Let me log out and show you those choices once more. When we come to our login screen, there's our choices on this system. We have GNOME, GNOME Classic, No Effect, Recovery Console, which you saw as a little console, Ubuntu 2D, which is the scaled down without fancy 3D effects, basically, a user-defined session, an XFCE rather, standard session, or the Ubuntu Studio session. So, like we said, it's nice to have choices.